The Dream of Alexandria. Chapter 1. The Harbor of Pharos. Dawn was a soft arrival upon the Mediterranean. The air above the water shifted gently from grey to rose, and the horizon stretched wide and endless, as though the world itself were opening its eyes after a long rest. Ships were already in motion. Their sails caught the first light, glowing pale gold as they curved in the wind. Tall-masted galleys from Rhodes, heavy-bellied grain ships from the Nile Delta, lean Phoenician traders with their pointed prows, all glided toward the safety of Alexandria's great harbor, and watching over them, as it had for decades, stood the Pharos lighthouse, rising higher than any other building in the known world. Its marble body shone pale and magnificent. At night, a great brazier of fire burned at its summit, its reflection cast by polished bronze mirrors so that ships far out to sea could find their way home. Even now, in the tender light of morning, the tower seemed alive, its height touching both earth and sky. On the quayside, life stirred with its usual rhythm. Dockworkers lifted amphorae of oil and wine, jars of honey, sacks of grain. Fishermen mended nets that smelled of salt and weed. Merchants called out greetings in many tongues: Greek, Egyptian, Aramaic, Latin. A man from far to the north wore a cloak of thick wool, his beard salted with the sea air. Another, lean and dark-eyed, spoke of incense caravans that crossed deserts, farther than most sailors had ever dared to dream. Among them, moving quietly, was a scribe named Callias. His hair was dark, his robe simple, his fingers already ink-stained from the day before. He was young, but his duties were serious: to record, to copy, to carry words from mouth to parchment so that nothing would be forgotten. By decree of the Ptolemaic kings, every ship that entered Alexandria's harbor was required to surrender its scrolls. They would be copied by the library's scribes, the originals stored among the great collection, the copies returned to the ship. It was said, perhaps boastfully, perhaps truthfully, that no word from any land should pass through Alexandria and fail to leave behind an echo. Callias stood by the water and listened. Sailors told tales as they unloaded, of storms on the Aegean, of pirates near Crete, of markets in Tyre where glass shone like captured light. He held their words gently, like seeds. Some he would write in his ledger, others he would keep in the quiet corners of his memory, to flower later in dreams. That evening, when the harbor settled and gulls cried their last notes into the dusk, Callias walked back through the city. The streets of Alexandria were broad and straight, laid out in a perfect grid. Lamps glowed at doorways. Vendors roasted chickpeas on small fires, their smoke carrying the scent of cumin. Musicians played soft flutes, their notes rising into the night like prayer. When at last he reached his chamber, a small room near the library's outer halls, he unrolled a new scroll given to him by a traveler from the Black Sea. He lit a small oil lamp, the flame steady and patient, and read until sleep found him. The words blurred into dreams, and the quiet night of Alexandria carried him deeper still. Chapter 2. The Library Halls. Morning within the library was like entering a forest of stone. Tall columns held the roof aloft, their painted surfaces rising into shadow. Light filtered through lattice windows, falling in gentle shafts onto polished floors and long wooden tables. Everywhere were scrolls. Shelves stretched to the ceiling, ladders leaned against them, scribes climbing carefully, their robes brushing wood. Each scroll bore a mark: red cord for medicine, green for philosophy, black for laws, gold for poetry. It was said that there were more than 400,000 scrolls in these halls. words gathered from every land known to man. Callias moved quietly, dusting, cataloguing. He lifted scrolls and placed them in their places, careful not to break their edges. Some were wrapped in silk, some sealed with wax, some so old they crumbled if touched too roughly. He paused often to read. Here was a fragment of a Babylonian hymn, there, a recipe for bronze tools from an island in the far sea. On another shelf, a fragment of Homer's Iliad, written in a hand so fine it seemed like spider-silk. The air smelled of cedar oil, rubbed into the papyrus to keep away worms and moths. It was a smell Callias loved, sharp, sweet, eternal. It was the scent of preservation, the scent of memory made safe at midday. The scribes gathered in a shaded courtyard, where olive trees spread coolness and fountains murmured. Scholars debated geometry, tracing triangles in the sand with reed sticks. Others spoke of medicine, of the humours of the body, of herbs gathered from distant mountains. Callias sat quietly, listening, feeling that in this place all the world was present. That night, when the lamps were lit and the outer city grew quiet, the library's halls still whispered. Scribes worked by lamplight. Guards padded softly along colonnades. Callias copied a scroll of Egyptian hymns, his quill scratching steadily, his eyes following the lines like a pilgrim tracing steps on a holy road. When he finally closed his eyes, the last thing he heard was not silence, but the rustle of parchment, like the rustle of leaves in an endless forest. Chapter 3. The Traveller's Voices. Alexandria was a city of many tongues. Its streets teemed with life. Syrians with bright textiles, Nubians leading camels, laden with ivory, Jews reciting psalms in quiet doorways, Greeks speaking of philosophy, Egyptians in linen robes selling bread and fish. The city was a meeting of rivers, all flowing into one great sea of voices. In the library, travellers arrived daily to read, to speak, to teach. A physician from Kars brought news of new herbs, remedies hidden in mountain meadows. A mathematician from Rhodes explained clever ways to measure distance by the shadow of the sun. A poet from India, his words translated line by line, recited verses of love and longing in a rhythm unlike any Greek song. Callias listened, entranced. He wrote everything he could, not because he was ordered, but because he longed to hold it. Each voice was a lantern, each word a flame. If enough lanterns were gathered, perhaps the world itself would glow without end. In the evenings, he walked along the canal. Lanterns floated on the water, their reflections doubling the stars above. Fishermen mended nets. Bakers baked flatbread upon hot stones, their children sleeping nearby. The sea breathed against the quay, steady as the pulse in a resting wrist. The city was a vast, slow heart. Callias carried its rhythm within him. Chapter 4. The Garden of Scholars. Behind the library stretched gardens where scholars rested from their work. Olive trees gave shade, lotus pools mirrored the sky and marble. Benches welcomed weary bodies. Here, debate turned to contemplation, and contemplation to silence. Among the scholars was Demetrios, old and white-haired, his voice calm as a river. Knowledge is not possession, he would say. It is light, and light is endless. One evening, Demetrios placed a scroll in Callias's hands. Not every word will last, but some words, like some seeds, grow long after we are gone. By lamplight, Callias unrolled it. It was a hymn written centuries ago, praising the sun as both father and mother of all things. He copied it carefully, then added his own note. Knowledge rests as the sun rests, but always rises again. The gardens hummed with crickets. The stars unfolded above. Callias sat by the lotus pool until sleep overcame him. The reflection of the stars trembled in the water, like words trembling on the edge of a dream. Chapter 5. The Eternal Light. Years drifted past as gently as pages turned. Callias grew older, his hands slower, his eyes dimmer, but he never left Alexandria, never strayed from the library's halls. The city changed. New rulers, new merchants, new ships in the harbor. But still the lighthouse burned, and still the library's lamps glowed, casting their warmth over scroll and parchment, over the faces of men and women who came to seek. One evening, Callias sat alone among the scrolls. The halls whispered as they always had, sandals against stone, parchment rustling, lamps crackling. He thought of the lighthouse, how its beacon had shone through storms, guiding sailors home. He thought of the library, its beacon guiding minds through storms of ignorance and forgetting. His head grew heavy. His hand slipped from his quill. Slowly, gently, he laid it aside. As he drifted toward sleep, he knew, with a quiet certainty, that even if fire or war or time itself should claim these halls, the dream of Alexandria would endure. For knowledge is not stone, not papyrus, not lamp oil. Knowledge is a longing, and longing cannot be burned. Callias closed his eyes. The library's whisper became the sea's whisper, and the sea's whisper became silence, and silence, at last, became sleep.